So it's 6 p.m. on Monday, February 25th, 2019. I'm calling the Lisle Library District Finance Committee meeting to order. Chris, roll call please.
Henri White.
Here.
Jay Fisher.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Tatiana Weinstein.
Here.
Beth McCullen.
Here.
Okay, second item on the agenda, opportunity for visitors to speak. I do not see any visitors. So let's move to agenda number 3.
I move the approval of the minutes of the October 22nd, 2018 Finance Committee meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I hear none. Roll call please.
Jay Fisher.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Henri White.
Aye. Okay, motion passed. Item number 4, report/discussion, the latest cash forecast. So Tatiana, Ginger is absent today, so maybe you can talk a little bit about, give a little context before we start the discussion.
Sure. Ginger provided a brief summary within the packet, and this is in consultation with Ken Herdeman, our Ellers representative.
What page are you on, please?
It's right after the minutes.
Oh,
Before
got it.
Yeah, it's
the-
very
Yeah.
brief summary.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
So the library isn't going to receive any additional property tax payments until June of 2019. So obviously, we will see our cash balances decrease until the next tax payment in June of 2019. Ken mentioned that the CDs have matured with higher percentages. Our IMET, our Illinois funds, are paying over 2.3% interest. Our MB financial account has increased the interest rate to 1.6%. This is, the next paragraph talks about investing in cash for longer terms. This has been a recommendation for quite a while now. And then at the end, he does mention that we have an investment maturing in March. This is upcoming, and he will remind Ginger again before it happens, and then we'll have a conversation about whether or not we want to reinvest that. So that's the summary, and then we get to the cash forecast, which we've been provided in the past, and this is the same kind of spreadsheet, I think, or chart. We're showing the actuals in yellow and the projections in the white with the totals in the green. This is something that we've been looking at. It shouldn't be a surprise.
So any questions or discussions?
The investment maturing on March 11th is in what fund?
I am not sure.
Okay.
Again, I'm sorry, Ginger had an emergency, so
Okay.
she provided this in the packet, and I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
But we will get more info. I mean, we will let the treasurer know as soon as it comes up, and we have until the 11th of March to make that decision.
Yeah, and you can see the consolidated cash flow, you got 160,000. Looks like it's gonna be maturing in March.
Oh, is that one maybe? Okay.
Yeah, she's referring to, but I don't know what investment vehicle this has.
What
is
page
in.
are you, of the cash flow forecast?
Yeah, the first page.
Page 1?
Consolidated cash
The
flow. You
consolidated
can
one,
see,
okay.
Yeah, under the investment maturity, it's got 160. I just don't know what investment that 160 is in.
It's Wells Fargo Bank.
Oh, you got it?
Oh, you're in the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We purchased it in March of 2016, so it's due on.
3/11.
As 3/11. It was paying, looks like 1.2.
I don't know what you think. I mean, I think 4 years might be pushing it a little. I mean, this is theoretically, right? Operating income, right, reserve. It's not in special reserve, is
It's not in special reserve.
no?
No, I mean, it's definitely have a higher yield. I think the real question would be, should we wait? And then what is a good cycle for us to pick it up? Because right now, clearly the interest rate has been favorable, so we have a lot more short-term investment. You can see our investment tier, the ladder has decreased for the last couple of years, right? So what's your view, Jay, on this one? You think we should still have this only have one single investment have maturity in 4 years, right? We're not asking for him to change our investment maturity for our entire portfolio. Are you
And then I don't know what is the, if you sell or cash in a US agency note before maturity, is there a penalty? I know, like, if you cash in your CD before it's termed,
Yeah, I'm
then
sure
you lose a
there's-
month of interest.
Yeah, so I'm sure you forfeit interest, but I'm sure you will keep your principal. So
Right.
right now, our weighted average maturity in Ginger's note is 1.5 years, which is
Okay.
pretty short.
Mhm.
So I don't, I think it's okay for one single note to have a maturity of 4, because that would not really that would not further
160.
Oh, it's
increase our-
160,000?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's not,
our maturity ladder, I would say.
Okay.
But that is a good question to say, what would be the right kind of weighted maturity for us in light of future investment we're gonna make? That really comes back to what's the strategic plan, how we're gonna do with reserve. I think we can do it at the time when we have a budget discussion, and then we can structure a portfolio to support the cash needs.
I think that's smart.
Okay.
These don't break it up into, like, special reserve is not listed here as to, or maybe it is and I'm just not finding it,
I think it does.
as to how that money is invested.
It's not broken down by our funds.
Right.
Correct, so you can't correlate like the cash flow statement to our fund, but in the future, that's probably one thing we can make it consistent, because what Ginger has, it just really by the institution, right?
Yeah, the
So
bank.
we do have a Lisle Savings Bank, US Bank, what is the cash receipts and balance? But that ultimately should roll up because the consolidated version still doesn't give us a good picture, because the consolidated version is the first page that is consolidated all the bank's receipts, so you can see the overall cash flow, but they don't identify very good in terms of source of funds that we see in our treasury report. So in the future, we'll see how we can structure it to be consistent. The monthly treasury report will be consistent with the cash flow report.
That'd
But
be
today
great.
it's not, yeah.
And I think Ken mentioned they're working with a different database, do you remember? I think they're still learning it, so it might come out with a different chart system.
Well, and you can see where my concern is, if the facility committee says in support of the strategic plan, we want to accomplish A, B, and C, but if we have our reserve fund all in the longer-term investments,
Sure.
Absolutely.
we can't accomplish
Yeah,
it.
I mean, this is a comment that I kind of talked with Tatiana as well, is that I think in order to make, the reason I requested the cash flow was kind of in order to have a meaningful cash flow, you really have to have a good forecast on what to yet to be spent. And here, if you look at the consolidated version, it's really just a carry on of the average, the payroll and average AP doesn't really have that. The capital project and the timing of those payments, which should be going back to physical committee, plant committee, that they had this project list, right? They should have I think Tom Hummel was saying that he is having conducted some sort of aging report of the building. So we'll be able to see, I think Beth, you prepared that capital project list, right? So we'll be able to see what infrastructure in this building, what's it aging, and what needs to be repaired. And then we're gonna line that out in terms of the timing, approximate cost that will feed into the cash flow. So we'll be able to have more meaningful discussion at that time, including what is a optimal kind of weighted average portfolio investment
And budget discussions
and budget
too.
discussion, right? So that's really has to roll all the way up to budget discussion as well to feed into our cash flow discussion here.
Right, and that goes back to my first comment, is if we're gonna do something in 2 years, that's gonna require a lot of money, and we have something tied up in 4 years that we might need it, what is the penalty for getting rid of it early?
Yeah.
So so that sort of works.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, for sure. Any other questions? And there's, yeah.
Great report, though. It moves us one step closer.
And there's one thing that I kind of made a comment to Tatiana was the Lisle Savings Bank. Okay, so we said we're going to invest in local businesses, which we clearly do here. But at the same time, we also make sure we do get competitive rates. If you look at, we have like $200,000 in Lisle Savings Bank. We get an average interest, well, annual approximate interest of 812. So it's not really competitive in light of the interest environment today. So we'll take a follow-up discussion with Ginger as to when this CD is going to mature, and how we can make sure we get more competitive rates going forward, and still invest in the community. Okay, so if there's any more discussion, item 4. If not, let's move to item number 5. That's discussion RFP considerations regarding audit services for the Lisle Library District. So I made that request to Tatiana a few months ago, and she did a great job in terms of giving us some examples of some RFPs for some audit services. The audit firm we have been with them for quite a few years. Right. I don't think we ever had a competitive bid at that time, and based on kind of my personal observation in terms of their services, it's not cheap. We spent what, $8,000 on audit services, but it's pretty standard. You can tell in the coming in for a presentation, our internal control is fairly good, sound. So we don't really have any complex issues. Our financial issue is pretty simple. And I don't see them give us a very value-added services the last few years. I think it's good practice, go out and see what's out there and get a competitive bid as well.
And just to follow up, so in the packet, I asked Ginger to source some RFPs out there. They're not a lot out there that are library-specific or library district-specific. So she did provide us with 3 example RFPs. After those examples, just to kind of frame our discussions tonight. After those examples, I asked Ginger to pull up a list of proposed questions that we could insert into the RFP, a la our RFP for legal services, because I think that was a nice model. I think that would be a nice model to follow. And then after that, I asked her to look into some of the larger firms that are out there, the ones that dealt with libraries. So there are 5 in the packet there listed. After that, you noticed a letter from Knuty. That's our current firm. They've been acquired by Sikich. So that is something to think about. And then piggybacking on that, Knuty did send us a letter that is not in your packet, but I'll talk about now, is that they're asking us to sign on with them again by March, just to let them know that we'll be continuing with them. They don't know we're going through this RFP process. So what I would recommend is that the committee ask Ginger and I to write up a letter responding to this letter, saying that we aren't going to sign this letter right now. The Finance Committee is going through an RFP process, of which you will be a part of, you will be considered for. It's just to let them know that this is why we're not signing on this. But we would include them in up for consideration. So,
Do you guys all agree with the approach?
okay.
Yes.
Great. So, again, as Longry mentioned, these sample RFPs are pretty similar. I like the one that's the first one that's provided, and there are some interesting.
I like the Palatine as well.
Yes.
Me too.
Okay, good. There are some things we should think about. I have our old request for proposal. I didn't. Can you share this one?
No.
Okay. This is for legal counsel. Maybe I have it on there. No, I don't. And obviously, we've got this pretty standard description of the LLD, scope of work, qualifications, requirements for the proposal and the questions that we ask them to answer. After that, we talk about the submission process, and after that, the process. I want to, before we get into the details of the samples, I want to talk about the timing of this. I think it's very important we move this swiftly but carefully, because we have to give any firm ample time to put us in their schedule. So once we come up with a draft, if we come up with a draft tonight, or at least not, we won't write it tonight, but if we come up with things we like from some of these drafts, what I can do is then draft something for the April board meeting. And if the board not adopts, but accepts that RFP, we can then push the RFPs or invite people to respond, giving the firms 30 days to respond, and then in the May board meeting, as an agenda item, accept an RFP in open meeting. So it would be March, April, May. And then June, July, August, we generally have our audit in August, and then we would like to have the presentation to the board by October. So to get in that schedule with whichever firm we go with, I think it's important that we really have a meaty discussion about what we'd like in the draft, and then have a draft ready for our April board meeting. For the March board meeting, sorry. So we can invite people and have 30 days for response time.
So you're looking to have the full board deal with it at the March meeting?
Yes.
But we have to
Then-
propose the questions,
That's
right?
true.
Right, so
For
I'd
this
like to go
meeting.
through what you liked about Palatine. I'm gonna take some notes, look at Ginger's questions, see if they ring true to you, and then I can prepare a draft for the March board meeting. And then it will be up for discussion again amongst all the board members. You'll have it'll be in the packet, and if there's any input, we can make some changes at the board meeting, and then approve of that draft, so we can send out the invitations and give 30 days for the firms to respond.
Do you mind going over the schedule again, or the proposed schedule?
Sure. Okay, so our board meeting is on March 13th, and I can have a draft prepared by that date. And if the board approves of that draft, or whatever changes we make to it, we would mail the invites the next day, okay, on the 14th. So that we would like to give the firms a month. So on April 15th, we would ask for the RFPs, and I could provide the board those copies by the 16th. And then at the May 8th board meeting, we can have an agenda item to make a decision.
I'm sorry, the May what?
May 8th is our board meeting, and we can have an agenda item on that agenda to make a decision.
That's when we would approve it?
Approve
Okay.
of the decision for auditor.
Yeah.
Okay, so would that mean we're approving it without presentations? We're approving it, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, I just want to make sure I understand. We're approving it based on the RFP response.
Right.
We're not including presentation as part of the decision-making process.
Right, it's like what we did with the legal counsel. It's the same process.
Okay.
The board received the RFPs, they answered our questions, and we're making that decision based on the RFP responses.
Okay.
I think you will have enough adequate, time, because if we miss the window, we'll be probably looking at getting December, the report probably December at the same time.
No, we want it in October.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm saying that if we miss
Right,
what
oh,
the
right,
timeline
yes,
that you
yes, yes.
mentioned, we're gonna probably push out for another couple more months.
And that's problematic because we want that information for our
Budgeters.
our levy, and, all of those things. And that's why it was hard this year to make adequate projections, because we didn't have our audit until December. I forgot what I was going to say regarding that. You said something that made me think of, I forgot. But is that okay, the schedule with everybody in regards to going March, April, May? I remember now. So if the board received the copies of the responses by the 16th, you have from April 16th to May 8th to review those responses. And if any board members have any questions regarding any of them, in the RFP, it does say, so it's not a open meetings, I can communicate with whichever firm if there's additional questions about any of the RFPs. So I hope that helps, Liz, with your presentation question.
No, my mind is just not thinking right. Okay, so the draft goes to the board on March 13th. And then RFP responses are due back on April 15th. The board receives the responses from you
The
on
next day.
April 16th, and the decision is,
May 8th.
The 8th.
okay, got it,
That's the regular board meeting.
got it. Okay.
And this is, again, it's kind of condensed, but we need to kind of do this now so we can get into the loop of being scheduled with any of these firms.
I misunderstood. I thought you said we were making a decision in October.
No.
I am delighted with this schedule.
Okay.
I totally misunderstood.
Okay. Okay, so to the meat of what we're talking about. If you've looked at any of it, does anything stand out? Again, a lot of this looks very standard, and we will model after our legal counsel RFP. Does anything stand out?
So, yeah, go ahead.
One of the things I noticed was one of these was for 3 years, one of these was for 4 years, and one of these
Exactly.
was for 5 years.
Right.
So I think we need to figure out how long we're looking to engage a company.
And some of them 5 years, but then like evergreen every year for 5 years. So,
Right.
yeah, and I was just kind of thinking, because I think this is a good model, how we did RFP for legal counsel. So the buckets, exactly kind of the same buckets, what we're talking about. So what you're asking us for the input is the questions. Because the scope of work, do we agree the scope of work pretty standard, just deliver audit report, and make a management presentation? And I'm just wondering, just make sure that we are aligned on the scope of work, right? Because I'm just kind of, I think if this is a document, eventually we're gonna give to all the potential candidates, then I think we need to make sure we align each of the bigger
Let's tell them
buckets.
if they do a really dull presentation, we cut their pay in half.
Is that partial cost saving measure?
No, that's a comment on the last presentation.
Interesting, you look at the Palatine, it was, the deliverables are pretty short.
Yeah,
But if you look at the Sycamore one, they each go on to like 10 bullet points under each of them. And there's 5 different scope of works, and there's 3 for Palatine, and there's like 10 for Bloomingdale. So-
On the Palatine, which I think we all, prefer, on the page 5 of the Palatine, there is a description of services that also
Goes in the
broadens the scope.
Okay.
So it does talk about testing and meeting with administration, again, standard stuff,
Okay.
field work, financial statements. It's, again, very standard.
Yeah.
And some of that Ginger did incorporate into her questions, so we'll get there. I'd like to go back to what Jay said about his contract length. What I would recommend is, I don't like signing contracts for longer than a year if it's a new firm, because you want to kind of test drive and see if you're happy with it. I can incorporate some language into the draft saying that if after a year, we'd be open to a 2-year contract or something like that, if that's what this committee would recommend. I wouldn't want to sign on a 5-year or 3-year contract right away. Maybe we'd like the year to see what they offer us and see how that relationship is.
Could we somehow set the price so it would be a not to exceed price, say in year 2 and 3? And my concern is, people sometimes will low bid year 1 in order to get your business. And then, once they know you, once they are familiar with you, they could jack up the price for year 2. And the first year is always gonna be the most painful, because it's gonna be somebody new coming in. And maybe we could say, we have the option to engage you at year 2 and year 3, so please price those out, or, I don't.
I don't think you'd put that in the RFP, but I think what we could do is, I think we're on the same page, is that we have like an inaugural year or a get-to-know-you year, and then after that, there is the option of a 2-year. So we would have that discretion to make that decision.
And I think, can you just say initial year, then upon mutual agreement, 2
Right.
years, and then you ask them to bid both parts of those.
Yes.
You don't have to ask them to bid just the first year. You bid over the entire term.
I've answered a lot of RFPs that were worded that way.
Okay, so, say it again, how would you like that? Upon,
Yes. How did I say it?
Upon mutual
Are we gonna-
agreement.
Upon mutual,
For
yeah,
1 year.
for 1 year, then upon mutual agreement. I would be happy to do it, to extend it to 1-year terms instead of a 2-year term, but for a 3-year period, and then they bid each of the 3 years.
but isn't that assuming that they would raise it?
Well, yes, we're assuming that, but they don't have to.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Is that
we-
one of the criteria we can use to compare the RFPs?
That's true. Or we can say, well, contract will be for 1 year with the option to renew for the next 2 years, pending mutual agreement or something. So that we have a way out, they have a way out. And, but at the same time, if everybody happy, this will become a 3-year contract.
Is that what you want?
I'm fine with that.
Just asking for a bid for 1 year with the option to renew for the next 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And upon mutual agreement.
I mean, here, in the Palatine one, it says, it's the intent of the board to continue its relationship with the auditor for no less than 3 years, subject to the annual review by the board.
Yeah, that's a good way to
Yeah, I
say
know.
it.
Which,
I'm on page 3
yes,
of the Palatine,
and where is that?
under terms of engagement.
Okay.
It also says you have to appropriate money for it, but,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I don't know
So
what that is.
that answers that question. The other that I mentioned before is schedule of work, because this is time dependent. So I'd like to have a sentence or two in the RFP that talks about the audit being, at least the work to be done in August and September with a presentation in October. And I know that in the Palatine example, it gives actual dates, I think, or close to dates. But I think giving a window of August, September for the work to be done, and then the presentation in October.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because in terms of when the time to complete the field work versus the time to issue the report, it's probably within the audit firm control. What we really care about is when they're gonna be able to finalize audit, deliver report, right? So I would prefer, instead of saying when they can get the job done, just say when they can deliver the report to us. That they will need to complete the audit and be able to present the final audit report at October board meeting.
Just that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would prefer that versus say when you're gonna finish your field work, because that's why we have, let them think about schedule, but we know what the deliverables are at the end of the day is October is important to us.
I think the only reason Ginger wanted that is so we could, on the library side of things, schedule our time to, but I mean, that can be done behind the scenes, I guess, as long as that.
Yeah, that's the question. Is that a criteria that we're gonna use to decide which firm?
Yeah.
Based on when they can come and interview staff? Or is that something to negotiate after?
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, if they agree to present in October, they're gonna have to work it out,
Yeah.
right? And we're gonna have to work it out, so.
The other thing I'd like us to consider is if you look in the Blooming, I think it's Bloomingdale, which is, I think, the second one. If you look on page 7, submission requirements, which is just at the very top. It's so much easier when you're evaluating RFP submissions if you make everybody do a standard format.
We had requirements in our legal, but we can definitely, I mean, that's in here. It asks for a signed letter of interest, answering the questions, resume. But we can take some from this list too, if there's anything.
I think, aren't you just saying that it's beneficial not necessarily to have this list, but just to make sure that all the the
Standard
proposals
form.
are in standard form, so it's easy for us to compare?
Well, right.
Uh-huh.
I guess I didn't really look at the,
But we could provide like what you're asking.
I guess here, the
Please.
questions in detail, I guess you would
Right.
assume that they
Well,
would answer them in the same
like
order.
when I see cover letter, I know exactly what I'm asking for. Table of contents, I know exactly what to provide. I don't remember what independence is, but, so boom, 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 boom. If somebody, right there, if they can't follow a list, you got a problem with them. And then the other thing is you can look at a comparison of, point number 2. You can lay them out. Let's say 4 people respond. I can look at point number 2 and give it an evaluation. I'm not digging to look through, a 20-page response to find where did they put the answer to this.
I mean, that's fine if that's what this committee wants as a standard kind of form order. I think that perhaps it leaves out the option for a firm to provide something extra. You know how I don't know if any of the legal provided extra information or they provided extra brochure and like photos. I don't know, what
You
it could.
put it in appendix
Sure, if
or
you-
attachment.
Yeah, if you want it, if you want that.
Because what you do if you're a weak firm is, I have 30 years in RFPs. So what you do is you hide the answers that you're going to be the weakest in somewhere, and you make your brochures prettier. You make your stuff that is the fluff less meaty, but more attractive.
Okay, I mean, that's up to you if you guys want, if you would like.
I think it's, the benefit of what Liz was saying, it
Standard
just
form?
help us, instead of every RFP, we had to reorient ourselves, talk about this. But it doesn't, I think it's beneficial if we can do that. Any additional content, they can put in
At the end?
appendix.
Okay,
Mhm.
so
That's
I would like to
practical.
know, what would you like? What order? So I can create the draft.
I think we have to do that last when we decide everything that's going to go in the RFP. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm just thinking how we're gonna make it more efficient. Are we gonna force fit under each of these? Or are we just talking this list in general and try to bucket them according to kind of the order we want to see? So I think, Liz, I think we can talk about, maybe let's start with what question we want to ask. And then we can see these questions, does it belong to, content 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5?
We could have a separate number, in a sense, for the contents that is just questions. And continue with, because the first few are telling us about the firm themselves. The independence means that they're not related to any board member. The license to practice is the
Right.
same. They're gonna tell you about their background, their government experience,
Essentially, that
references.
list is what we have here in our legal document, the legal RFP. I mean, we're asking for qualifications, we're asking for a resume, which / cover letter. We're asking them to answer questions and provide detail. At the end of this RFP, we can then say, please provide this information in this order.
That works, yep.
So we can have it in one.
Right, and I kind of like the way that they said up front, please provide it in this order, and then they listed everything. So if you could do it that way, that's perfect.
Okay, definitely do that. So just presentation.
And then I had a question on, again, going back to the Palatine, page 5. What do they mean, and this is probably having to do with some part of auditing I don't understand. Point 1, they say planning and interim testing. What is the interim testing piece?
I believe that's when they ask us to pull certain reports from our auditing database, and then they'll test it against standards and reports. So it's, help me out, when Ginger has to pull all of these, they'll
Sometimes
put
they-
a sampling of invoices, and they call it testing against other reports.
Our
they want.
documents
Yeah.
that
Like
we've
if-
approved at board meetings.
And that we've also done it in the correct way, where we've had board members sign off on certain things. So it's just a real review, and they do like samplings across
it.
the board.
And it could be that they, before, like, looks like, in terms of timeline, before they begin the official field work, it could be, like before the official field work start in July, but maybe in June timeframe, they ask us to pull something and say, give us invoices against this particular financial statement or bank statement. So interim, before you officially begin the field test, you just do some sampling to start with, to see if there's any big gaps. So that will help you in terms of plan your field work when you actually officially begin your field work. That's my understanding. But.
Okay, cool. And then on item 7, do we know how many bound copies that we want?
We usually receive 14. We
Okay.
have a copy for the reference desk. We have a copy for all board members. We have like duplicates just in case, and we can always ask for more, but we generally ask for 14.
Okay, so do we just want to change that from 8 to 14?
We can put that in the RFP, yes.
Oh, okay, so we're not altering this one.
This is Palatine.
This is only a reference for us
Just
to take a look at what's
examples.
applicable.
Okay.
to
Yeah.
us.
Got it,
Yeah,
okay.
so if you would like us to put that in the RFP, I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay.
Providing 14
copies.
copies.
And electronic copy, which is a
Right.
Yeah.
version.
I think another thing that is, I know we're using the legal counsel, but mentioning GASB and following what's in the Government Accounting Standards Board guidelines. That's on page 4. I think
Yep.
we should probably put that into our RFP. Let's see, what else did I find? Is that? That's all of my notes. That would be.
Yeah, the Palatine one is pretty good, pretty comprehensive. And one thing I was kind of talking on a prior meeting is in the deliverables, they're pretty short, but then they have item B, annual comptroller report, which I really don't know what that is. I know we have our annual financial report,
Right.
audit reports, and then presentation to management and management presentation letter, but I don't know what annual comptroller's report is.
Well, some firms do send the report to the Illinois comptroller. I mean, maybe they do it. Sometimes the library does it themselves. I imagine that might be
That
what
was
they
one of
mean there.
Ginger's questions.
Yeah, I imagine that's what they mean. We can call them and ask why that's in their RFP, but. And again, I'll draft this RFP, and if we have more questions about the draft at the March board meeting, we can certainly change things. And then,
So they gave you this Palatine one in a format that you can edit, right? It's not a PDF.
no, it's a PDF.
Can you edit it, or do you have to have it retyped to merge this document and that one, I guess is what I'm saying.
It won't take long. I will use this as a model and then just pull in what Palatine has.
Wow. I just think it would be more time efficient to get this one. Because I think, I don't see a lot that's going to be removed from the Palatine one.
Well, there is some nuance. I mean, they have a tort immunity fund and some things that we would have to delete and modify. Unless this committee feels like we should mirror exactly what they have here, we could request that, but
I guess what I'm concerned about is unless I know what's going to be taken out,
well, that's why we're here. If you'd like to talk about what you like and what you don't like. And you will have a draft again to take a look at.
And like here, I don't really know, like page 2, right? They talk about the library budget, all funds on the modified accrual basis. I think we're on the cash basis, and then we convert to more of a, the accrual basis at the end of the audit period to help make those adjustments, so there's some things that definitely doesn't apply to us. Yeah, I think we can use that as example and modify it as you see kind of fit. And definitely the funds needs to be changed because there's some funds that we don't have. And we also simplify some of the funds as well. So the tort, definitely, we don't have those. And we don't have audit fund, to be specific. I think it's come from operating funds.
what's the name of the fund that we were trying to get rid of? I think, Beth, you were looking into it.
Working
The working cash,
Yeah,
working
was it?
cash, was it?
Okay.
Working cash, sorry.
Working
Yeah,
cash.
working cash, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Palatine one goes into extreme detail, but I don't think we necessarily have to
Yeah,
mimic,
I think so.
but pick and choose.
And I'm just thinking that's kind of interesting. They also ask for examples of work, which is pretty interesting. You know, is that going to be, what do you guys think is important as part of the requirements? Is giving us example of the work?
What does
Versus-
that mean?
Versus just, I'm assuming, sending us
Yeah,
the
provide
CAFRs,
2
the
or more
audits.
sample reports. That's actually see what other people's, how do they do other people's audit work. It's a page 5, item I, right above the project approvals, was talking about.
I actually
sample
think
work.
that it will tell us how much is boilerplate. How much is, you know, I mean, if you do it right, you can make the whole thing. Just make variable 1, variable 2, and make the whole thing, you know, hit go, and it'd be interesting to know how much is boilerplate.
Well, if we go to the proposed RFP questions, we can provide samples or links to samples, because I imagine
Links to
some
them,
would
yeah.
be
A lot of them are also public.
online,
Online,
right?
Yeah.
Just like ours is.
So
So,
mine is public, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I think
would
the
like to
idea of
see-
putting links would be good, instead of
providing an 80-page report.
multiple 80-page reports.
And I imagine that's absolutely possible. They would just link us out to some examples,
Mhm.
which is, I think, is a good idea, actually.
Mhm.
So it seems like some of these that Ginger is proposing would just kind of fit in with, be sub-points.
Yeah, I think hers is more working level, you know, what they need to do, what kind of system, do they understand, be able to audit more efficiently.
I mean, they're similar to the questions we asked, not similar, but in format to the legal firms we had questions for. We did ask for 3 public agency references. We can ask for that.
I mean, Palatine asked for 5. Do we want 3, 4, 5?
Minimum 3,
Yes,
up to 5.
okay.
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
Okay, got that.
Good answer.
Okay, I'm missing it, and I just can't find what we're looking for in terms of an implementation plan. And I think I read it, but I can't remember if I read it in the Palatine one or not. Or did I read it in another one?
Palatine one would be on 5, I think. Is that sort of what you're
Yeah,
looking for?
the just description of service underneath all the steps you go through, or?
Well, oh, here, provide a timeline. I can't stress that enough. We need to have that timeline.
Sure.
So, and I think some of Ginger's questions, like when she asked, how many days do you expect to be on site and consecutive? Those will be answered by using this question about the timeline. So I'm not sure that we need to answer or to ask this question if we're going to use that timeline.
Well, we're giving them a timeline regarding the October presentation, but you're talking about total project timeline?
Well, see, she's asking, how many days do you expect to be on site and then consecutive? And if they provide a timeline that addresses the following activities and any other activities that are appropriate,
What page are you on?
5.
5 of the Palatine, right under description of
Under the-
services.
So you're saying time frame is timeline?
I think a timeline says, from this date to this date, we're going to be on site doing this function. Then we're going to spend 2 days in the office and we're going to do this function. To me, maybe we need to change it to project plan. I mean, I want to know a detailed project plan, what they're doing on what date.
I think that's a little, I think that's a lot of detail that I'm not sure, I mean, because plans change sometimes, you have to adjust, and having that in an agreed upon RFP, I'm not so sure it has to be that.
And that's where I disagree.
Okay,
I
I
mean-
mean, this is just for discussion, and obviously it's going to be what the committee wants.
I've never seen a project plan be implemented perfectly, because that's never happens. But if you don't have a project plan to start out with, it's like, you don't have measurements upon which to even determine if you're on target or not.
I agree, having a plan is always great. I think that in these questions, we can ask them for a project plan and then ask them about their field work too, and see what they provide us in the response.
Yeah, I think in RFP, I think what we talk about most important is the deliverable. Can they deliver by our October board meeting?
Right.
And when we kind of, then we can follow up with, can you give us an example of what typical
Right.
plan looks like? But that can, unfortunately, I don't think it's only going to be a guideline because it depends on their workload and stuff. But what we cared most about is they deliver their work by October.
Right, I'm not sure they'll be able to provide us dates in their response RFP, because they're probably doing this with other entities. So providing actual dates of,
But they can provide a sample.
Yeah.
What typically is, 3.
2 to 3 weeks,
Yeah,
1 week.
Right. And then you kind of back to when you can have your final report delivered in
Right.
October.
Right, if they're not able to do it, at least in not a vague, but a gross rather than fine way, then they probably don't know what they're doing. So I'm fine if they do, you know, over this 2 weeks, this is what we're gonna accomplish. But I think it'll flesh out somebody who really is winging it.
Well, we can certainly ask for a project plan along with the fieldwork questions. I think that, and then see how they respond. If they respond in detail, like you may prefer, that'll be interesting, and then we'll see if others respond in other ways.
Right.
And
that's great.
okay.
So one question I think on the Palatine one, just, I think we brought this up too, is this whole fee proposal shall be maximum but not exceed. I think we should be open to, I don't think we should have a maximum at this point as part of the RFP, right?
I agree.
So we
See
can
what they
strike
come
that
up
one
with.
out.
And everything's negotiable, right?
yeah.
So,
Is that what it's saying, Marguerite?
Yes.
It's
Number
saying-
D?
It says
Yeah.
the proposed fee shall be the maximum not to exceed fee for each fiscal year shown,
Showing, I don't know where's,
which would be however long for the term of the contract is,
Oh.
correct?
not to seek fee for each fiscal year shown.
So,
It's possible
Are
it
we-
means over a 3-year period, we're gonna charge you 30,000.
It's like
Mhm.
max, like give you a
But,
ceiling.
but actually what we're going to do is charge you a built-in escalation of that 30,000 or something.
That's not the way I read it.
yeah, I don't know if you want to change it, but I think, are we looking for year one, we're going to charge you this, year two, we're going to charge you this, year three, we're going to charge you this?
yeah, no.
No?
No, I was more, well, yes, well,
Okay.
well, no, that's kind of the question, because that's the reason why we're building into contract to say, you know, this is a 1 year with the option for 2-year renewal.
Right, and
Mhm.
see
So are
what
we
they come
asking them
with.
to say you also propose what your year 2 or year 3 is, or it's gonna be a mutual agreement? Just only give us year 1.
I want to, because this would be a new firm, I'm more comfortable with just 1 year with the option. This fee proposal, I think this D refers to nothing above what the contract would agree to. I mean, that's how I read that, is that it won't exceed.
Well, here's what we want, and then you can write whatever we want to. I was just kind of curious how the word it here.
I think I want a year 1 quote, not to exceed. A year 2 quote, not to exceed, and a year 3 quote, not to exceed, with the option to renew after year 1 and an option to renew after year 2.
That's what I was thinking of as well.
So that kind of give us the maximum flexibility regardless, so that we have,
So just use the word not to exceed
Uh-huh.
in 1, 2, 3, okay.
Mm. I'm not sure Longree's thinking over there.
I would just, no, I think that's why I was just thinking about if I were the person who received the RFP, how would I bid, right? So
Mhm.
very likely I can't build in any escalation, because otherwise automatically people saying, oh, you want to just jack up price every year. So very likely the response will be, I have a flat fee for 3 years. Nobody want to give you a,
That's what I was said before, is
Discretion
that
of fees,
we're assuming
right?
they will raise their price. I mean,
Right.
Well, you sit around a table, okay, you got the VP of sales, you probably have the VP of marketing, you have the VP of strategy, you know, and you sit there and you negotiate, you know, and then you have the VP of personnel who's gonna provide the people, and they say, we really need this one, and this guy says this, and, you know, you all negotiate. I mean, I've been at those tables, so sometimes strategically, they'll wanna bid flat fee for 3 years. Sometimes strategically, they'll say, you know, we need our profits. So we'd rather walk away from the business if we can't get a 10% kicker every year. So,
If they think they need an escalation to do the, then bid that escalation. You know, maybe they will, maybe they
Right.
won't, it's up to them. But we can take that into consideration when we look at the RFPs.
exactly.
So you want a not to exceed.
every year. It
Mhm.
looks like that's the consensus, yeah.
I never get calls. I didn't even know that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's an 800 number.
Yes.
They want to sell me something.
Someone
any
from
other
credit card
comments, or-
services.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Can we look at the draft RFP questions, and would there be any you'd like to add or delete? What I've added to this list is providing samples or links, or if you provide just links too. And then providing 3
What
to 5
page are-
references.
The
Ginger-
back-
It's
the
It's like the
ginger
second to
questions,
last
the
page.
third to last page.
Questions After all the samples,
Okay.
right before there, yes. So the 2 things I've added was providing samples and then providing 3 to 5 references. So we're asking, also the project plan, so the number 1 question can be, provide us with a project plan including field work, A, B, C, D, E. And she has some questions about field work. If you want to take some time to look at those and see if this is her recommendation, what she would like to know. And she will be at our meetings to help guide us too.
So then we're also planning on asking for the qualifications, sort of, even though that's not
Right,
listed here.
right, it's in
These are
here.
just extra.
Absolutely. These are
Okay.
just the extra questions that we've
Okay.
asked them to provide at the end.
Yeah, because
Okay.
this will determine the workload for the staff, how many people to support, which is kind of correlate what you mentioned about the timeline, the project plan.
I'm sorry, could you repeat? I think you said you added 3 to the bottom or 2?
So at the top, you had mentioned the project plan. So in number 1, it will say, please provide us with a project plan for this, for audit work for the library, including field work. And then at the bottom, I just scribbled in because we talked about this, is providing samples of the work or links to samples of their audits. And then also provide 3 to 5 references. We've asked for their complete fee structure, asking them if they would be willing to review our institutional financial policies. These are things I think we need to know.
No?
Do we ever look into whether or not a contractor is insured and bonded?
Yes, that will be in there in terms of,
The background, that's part of the
Right.
background of the firm, yeah.
and conflict of interest. I think that's what the independence notation was, I think, that's what they mentioned.
I think most of the service, our service is pretty standard
Yes.
for public entities, right? So hopefully we'll be able, it will be not a very difficult decision.
I think we can come up with a pretty decent draft. And again, we can modify that at the meeting if we need to.
The only question I'm kind of debating was, I don't know, should we, maybe it's not gonna be part of RFP because the audit services is different than financial advisory services, right? So because I thought about, a lot of the accounting firm, in addition to the audit, they have a separate group, independent within the firm, to say if there are additional professional services, like help more in-depth analysis of your cash flow, or be able to kind of do some project analysis and stuff for us if we really need it. Depends on how big of the scope is. I don't think I'm just kind of, I don't know, maybe as part of the firm background, we can talk about the audit services, which is primary, but they also, maybe they have the other groups within the firm also could provide additional financial advisory services as well.
But I wonder if we want to keep that separate. As a
Yeah.
separate, just to
I
keep
was
things.
debating about that too, yeah. But again, I'm not talking about, it's different than this investment advisor. I was more thinking about yeah, like more, I was talking more in-depth analysis on the cash flow, because what kind of Ken said, because he's not really understanding our business well enough to be able to get more meaningful one. Maybe we can do it internally, we don't need any professional services to do, because right now, our financial situation is pretty straightforward, we don't have any complicated structure. Anyhow, so I think that's fine, we just not include it as part of the RFP, making it more clean, so.
I think that's smart.
Okay, any more discussions or questions? Okay, well, if not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the meeting is adjourned, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.